The arrival and first questions. The diplomatic shuttle. Peaceful dawn descended through the atmosphere of Meridian Prime, and Ambassador Kithara pressed her scaled face against the viewport. The Nexari diplomat had visited 47 different worlds during her career, but none had prepared her for what she saw below. The human colony stretched across a vast valley, its cities gleaming like jewels in the morning light. Beautiful architecture reached toward the sky, parks dotted the urban landscape, and rivers wound through residential areas like silver ribbons. It should have been a paradise. Instead, Kithara felt her breath catch in her throat. Every single structure was fortified. Energy barriers shimmered around important buildings. Weapon platforms rose from rooftops like metallic flowers. Defensive walls surrounded each district, their surfaces crackling with protective fields. Even the parks had hidden bunkers cleverly disguised as art installations. "Control tower to Peaceful Dawn," came a crisp human voice through the communication system. "Please adjust your approach to Vector 97 Alpha. Military escort will guide you to the diplomatic landing zone." Kithara's translator device struggled with the term military escort. The Nexari language had no real equivalent since her people had abandoned warfare 3,000 years ago. Most galactic species had done the same after joining the Confederation. 3 sleek fighters materialized around her shuttle, their hulls bristling with weapons that looked far too advanced for humanity's brief 40-year membership in galactic society. The ships moved with precision that spoke of constant training and absolute readiness. "This is Captain Rodriguez," the lead pilot announced. "Welcome to Meridian Prime, Ambassador. We'll have you on the ground in 15 minutes. Through her translator, Kithara could hear something in the human's voice that made her uncomfortable. It wasn't hostility or aggression. It was alertness, constant, unwavering vigilance, as if threats might emerge from empty space at any moment. As they descended, Kithara studied the human settlements more carefully. Children played in schoolyards, but those yards had defensive positions built into playground equipment. Markets bustled with activity, but every merchant wore what appeared to be personal armor. Gardens bloomed with flowers, but automated turrets were concealed among the roses. The landing pad sat in the heart of New Constantinople, Meridian Prime's capital city. As the shuttle touched down, Kithara could see her welcoming committee waiting. 20 humans stood in formation, half wearing elegant diplomatic robes and half in full military dress. Every single one of them was armed. Kithara stepped onto the platform, her 4 legs adjusting to the slightly heavier gravity. The air smelled clean and fresh, carrying hints of growing plants and distant rain. A tall woman with silver hair stepped forward, her movements graceful despite the obvious armor beneath her formal robes. "Ambassador Kithara, welcome to Meridian Prime," the woman said with a warm smile. "I am Director Elena Torres, head of Interspecies Relations. We are honored by your presence." Kithara performed the traditional Nexari greeting, her crest flaring in a pattern of respect. "The honor is mine, Director Torres. The Confederation is eager to learn more about human society and culture." "Excellent," Director Torres replied. "We have prepared comfortable quarters for you in the diplomatic district. I hope you'll find our hospitality adequate." As they traveled through the city in an elegant but obviously armored vehicle, Kithara observed human daily life. Citizens walked the streets with purpose and happiness. Children laughed as they played games. Artists displayed their work on street corners. Merchants called out advertisements for their goods. But everyone was armed. Elderly humans carried weapons appropriate to their physical capabilities. Young adults bore sophisticated energy rifles and plasma sidearms. Even children wore protective gear and carried what appeared to be emergency defense devices. It wasn't threatening or aggressive. It was simply normal, like wearing clothes or breathing air. "Director Torres," Kithara said carefully, "I notice your people are very well equipped for personal defense. Is Meridian Prime currently facing some form of threat?" The human woman's smile never wavered, but something shifted in her eyes. "We believe in being prepared, Ambassador. It's an important part of human culture." "Prepared for what?" "Whatever might come," Director Torres replied simply. The diplomatic quarters were stunning. elegant buildings surrounded by magnificent gardens, with architecture that blended human aesthetics with practical considerations for Kithara's physiology. Her rooms were spacious and comfortable, with large windows offering views of the city and the mountains beyond. Through those windows, she could see more defensive installations scattered across the mountainsides like watchful guardians. That evening, Director Torres hosted a formal dinner in Kithara's honor. The food was exceptional, prepared with careful attention to Nexari dietary requirements. The human guests were intelligent, cultured, and surprisingly well-informed about galactic affairs. Conversations flowed from art to science to philosophy with equal ease. But every human remained armed throughout the meal. Servers carried weapons alongside their serving trays. Musicians performing for entertainment kept rifle cases next to their instruments. Even the children playing in the courtyard outside wore protective equipment as naturally as jewelry. During a pause in conversation, Kythera decided to address the question directly. "I must ask," she said. "Dad, your people seem extremely focused on military preparedness. Most species in the Confederation moved beyond such concerns centuries ago. We have the Galactic Peace Accords, mutual defense treaties, the Confederation Navy. What exactly are you preparing to fight?" The table fell silent. Humans exchanged glances that seemed to communicate something beyond Kithara's understanding. Director Torres set down her glass slowly, her expression growing serious. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "how much do you know about human history?" "The standard briefing materials," Kithara replied. "Your species achieved faster-than-light travel approximately 200 years ago. You've been expanding across this sector ever since. 40 years ago, you made contact with the Confederation and have been integrating successfully. And what do those materials say about our homeworld?" Kithara consulted her memory implants. "Earth is listed as restricted access. I assumed there were environmental protection protocols in place." The silence stretched longer this time. Director Torres stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. The lights of New Constantinople sparkled below like stars against dark water. "There were protocols," she said finally, "but not the kind you're thinking of." "What kind, then?" "The kind designed to protect other species from learning certain truths," Director Torres replied. "The kind that exist because some knowledge is dangerous simply by being known." Kythera felt a chill run down her spine. In 30 years of diplomatic service, she had never heard a human speak with such quiet intensity. "Are you saying there's something the Confederation doesn't know about?" Director Torres turned back to face her. "I'm saying there are some things that sleep better in darkness, Ambassador. Some truths that bring danger just by existing in someone's mind." "But surely, you asked why humans are so heavily armed," Director Torres interrupted gently. "The answer is simple. We learned that the universe is not as safe as most species believe. We learned that there are things in the void between stars that most civilizations never encounter. We learned that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be prepared for war." Kithara stared at the human woman. "You're saying all of this," she gestured toward the city, the weapons, the fortifications, "is to protect against something specific?" "Not just to protect ourselves," Director Torres said quietly. "To protect everyone." The dinner concluded with polite conversation about safer topics, but Kithara couldn't focus on art or literature. As she prepared for sleep in her comfortable quarters, she found herself staring out at the city lights and wondering what humans knew that the rest of the galaxy didn't. She had come to Meridian Prime expecting to write a routine report about an over-militarized young species that needed guidance toward peaceful integration. Instead, she found herself facing questions that 30 years of diplomatic training had never prepared her to answer. What had happened on Earth? Wabius. Were humans so afraid of? And why did their fear extend to protecting species they had barely met? As she finally drifted toward sleep, Kythara made a decision. She would extend her mission on Meridian Prime. Whatever the humans were hiding, whatever they were preparing for, she needed to understand it. The implications were too significant for the Confederation to ignore. Outside her window, human patrols continued their routes through the city streets, weapons ready, eyes scanning the sky for threats that other species couldn't even imagine. The hidden truth revealed. 3 weeks had passed since Kithara's arrival, and her questions had only multiplied. Director Torres had arranged cultural tours, historical presentations, and meetings with various human officials. Each interaction was pleasant, informative, and utterly frustrating. The humans were masters of giving detailed answers that revealed nothing important. Today was different. Kithara had specifically requested access to human historical archives, and after considerable discussion, Director Torres had agreed to arrange it. The archive complex sat on the outskirts of New Constantinople, a massive structure that seemed to grow from the mountainside itself. Like everything else on Meridian Prime, it was beautiful and heavily fortified. Energy barriers protected the entrances, and sensor arrays tracked every movement in the surrounding area. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the chief archivist, was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and gentle hands. She also carried enough weaponry to outfit a small military unit. "Welcome to our Historical Preservation Center, Ambassador," Dr. Mitchell said warmly. "We maintain records from throughout human expansion, including materials salvaged from our origin worlds." The main exhibition areas contained familiar displays: early space exploration, first colony ships, the development of faster-than-light travel, expansion into the outer systems. Kithara had seen similar presentations from dozens of species. Every civilization was proud of its journey to the stars. But as they moved through the exhibits, she began noticing gaps. The timeline jumped abruptly from early expansion directly to Confederation contact, skipping over several decades entirely. Display cases stood empty with placards reading "Restricted Access" or "Classification Pending." "Dr. Mitchell," Kithara said, "I notice there seems to be a gap in your historical record. What happened during the period you call the Silent Years?" The archivist's expression grew somber. "Those records are kept in a separate section, Ambassador. Most visitors find the standard displays more comfortable." "I would like to see the restricted materials, please." Dr. Mitchell and Director Torres exchanged one of those meaningful human looks. After a long moment, Dr. Mitchell nodded. "Very well, but I must warn you. Some of our historical records from that period are deeply disturbing." They passed through multiple security checkpoints, each one scanning Kithara with different energy patterns. Beyond the final barrier, the atmosphere of the archive changed completely. The walls were darker here, made of materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The air felt heavier, charged with intention that made Kithara's scales itch. The first display case stopped her cold. It contained what appeared to be a piece of space debris, but the metal was wrong. It twisted in ways that hurt to look at directly, forming patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than her eyes could process. The surface was covered with markings that made her feel dizzy and nauseous. "This fragment was recovered from the outer rim of the Kepler system," Dr. Mitchell explained quietly. "It was all that remained of the colony ship New Hope and her 12,000 passengers." "What happened to them?" "They encountered something that shouldn't exist," Director Torres said from behind her. "Something that operates outside the laws of physics as we understand them." The next display showed human military equipment from the Silent Years, but these weren't normal weapons. The designs were alien and disturbing, incorporating materials that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. Some devices appeared to bend space around them, while others existed in a constant state of quantum uncertainty. "We developed these specifically to fight an enemy that conventional weapons couldn't touch," Dr. Mitchell explained. "Normal matter has no effect on beings that exist partially outside our reality." Kithara studied a rifle that seemed to flicker between existing and not existing. "What kind of enemy requires weapons like these?" "The kind that exists in the spaces between dimensions," a new voice said. Kithara turned to see a tall man in military uniform approaching. "The kind that treats our physical laws as suggestions rather than rules." Director Torres stepped forward. "Ambassador Kithara, this is General Marcus Kane, military advisor to the Colonial Authority." The general was older than most humans Kithara had met, his face marked by lines that spoke of difficult decisions and sleepless nights. His weapons were different too, incorporating the same reality-bending technology as the museum pieces. General Kane commanded our defense forces during the Void Hunter incursions, Director Torres explained. Void Hunters? Kithara asked. General Kane led them to a secure viewing room with heavily shielded walls. Extra-dimensional predators, he said simply. They exist in the spaces between realities, feeding on conscious life. Most species never encounter them because most species stay close to home, travel established routes, avoid the deep void where reality grows thin. He activated a holographic display showing star charts marked with red zones. Humans are explorers by nature. We push boundaries, seek new frontiers, go places other species consider impossible or foolish. 60 years ago, one of our deep-range exploration vessels encountered something that changed everything. The display showed images that made Kithara's vision blur, creatures that weren't quite creatures, existing in spaces that weren't quite spaces. They moved through reality like predators through water, leaving distortions that persisted long after they passed. The crew of the Endeavour made first contact with the Void Hunters in the Magellan Drift, General Kane continued. The ship was changed. When it returned to human space, it brought passengers that shouldn't exist, and knowledge that no sane being would want to possess. What happened then? War, the general said simply. A war fought in dimensions we barely understand, against enemies that exist partially outside our reality. We lost 17 colonies before we learned how to fight them effectively. Dr. Mitchell brought up new displays showing evacuation records, casualty reports, and desperate military communications. The numbers were staggering. Millions of humans had died in conflicts that most of the galaxy never knew occurred. But you defeated them? Kithara asked. We drove them back, General Kane corrected. We learned to wound them, to make our space painful for them to inhabit. We developed weapons that could touch beings made of living void, created barriers that could hold entities that exist in 11 dimensions. But defeat? No, Ambassador. They're still out there, waiting in the spaces between stars. The final display showed current defensive positions throughout human space, monitoring stations at the edge of reality, weapon platforms designed to fire into other dimensions, and fleets equipped with technology that existed at the intersection of science and nightmare. This is why we remain armed, Director Torres said quietly. This is why our children learn to fight before they learn to read. This is why every human settlement looks like a fortress. But why hide this from the Confederation? Kithara demanded. If these Void Hunters threaten all life, surely the galaxy deserves to know. General Kane's expression grew grim. Because knowledge of them makes you visible to them, Ambassador. Species that know they exist become targets. The more you understand about their nature, the more they can understand about yours. We serve as a barrier, Director Torres added. Human space forms a wall between the deep void and the populated galaxy. We monitor the dimensional boundaries, maintain the defense, and face the hunters so other species never have to know they exist. Kithara felt the weight of this revelation settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. You're saying humanity has been fighting a secret war to protect the entire galaxy? For 60 years, General Kane confirmed. We've lost worlds, ships, and millions of lives to keep the rest of the galaxy safe, and will continue to do so for as long as necessary. But the cost is ours to bear, Director Torres said firmly. Other species aren't equipped for this kind of warfare. The psychological impact alone would devastate most civilizations. Humans are adaptable. We can face horrors that would drive other species mad and still function. As they returned to the diplomatic quarters that evening, Kithara's mind raced with implications. The Confederation leadership expected her to report on human militarization, to recommend integration protocols that would encourage them to abandon their weapons and defensive preparations. But now she understood the truth. Humanity wasn't a militaristic young species that needed guidance toward peace. They were the galaxy's secret guardians, bearing a burden that would crush most civilizations. That night, as she prepared her report to the Confederation Council, Cathara made a choice that would define the rest of her career. Instead of recommending that humans reduce their military preparations, she would suggest the opposite. She would recommend that the Confederation provide whatever resources and support humanity needed to maintain their vigil. Some truths were too dangerous to share widely, but some guardians were too valuable to lose. Outside her window, human patrols continued their endless watch, standing guard against threats that the galaxy couldn't imagine and must never be allowed to discover. In the deep void between stars, ancient hungers stirred and tested the barriers that humanity had built with blood and sacrifice. The price of peace, Cathara had learned, was eternal vigilance by those willing to pay it.